lot of very iconic Italian foods are the product of this sort of Americanization, including spaghetti and meatballs, lasagna, and the modern style of pizza, which is to say a flatbread loaded up with tomato sauce and cheese and peppers and olives and mushrooms and pepperoni and whatever else. Making pizza in this way was always experimental rather than traditional, and one of the lingering legacies of just how experimental it was is the fact that so many different parts of America each have a slightly different regional style of pizza, reflecting the distinct ways their own Italian populations attempted to reimagine the food for American customers back in the day. Even things like pizza bagels or English muffin pizzas are much older than you might expect and reflect this era of trial and error. America's first dedicated pizzeria is usually said to be Lombardi's in New York City, a still functioning restaurant in Manhattan, started by an immigrant from Naples in 1905. At that time, pizza would have still been very much a foreign novelty food, but by the 1940s, the magazine The Atlantic was writing that in this country you can find pizza wherever there is an Italian colony, from the Latin Quarter in San Francisco to Bleecker Street in New York to Hanover Street in Boston. You eat it, usually, sitting in a booth in a bare, plain restaurant with a map of Vesuvio on the walls, a jukebox, and a crowded bar. The customers are Italian families, bohemians, lovers, and if a college is nearby, students and faculty members. So in time, Italian-American style pizza had become so popular that even the Italians back home had to play a bit of catch up. The years after World War II saw Italy experience a huge tourism boom as many Italian Americans, and Americans in general, began to visit the country in large numbers in order to connect or reconnect with Italian culture. This phenomenon, in turn, incentivized restaurants in tourism-heavy parts of Italy to Americanize their food a bit in order to meet the expectations of American tourists. So pizza historians will often note that in Italy, pizza, in the way we know it today, didn't really catch on as a common nationwide food until after the war, and was more often influenced by American traditions than the other way around. As the New York Times food columnist noted in 1953, we heard the other day that there are more pizzerias in the United States than in all of Italy. There is a fairly controversial Italian writer named Alberto Grandi who wrote a provocative book a few years ago, taking his countrymen to task for spreading so much sentimental mythology about their supposedly traditional foods. In reality, he says, a lot of the most iconic Italian dishes are actually very recent in origin and owe their existence far more to Italian Americans than Italians themselves. On the subject of pizza, he says, "For my father in the 1970s, pizza was just as exotic as sushi is for us today. But in 1970s America, pizza was anything but exotic. Pizza was in fact one of the many American cultural products that had really blown up in the post-war era, thanks to a combination of new technology and the growing wealth of the American middle class." The many innovations that revolutionized American food production in the aftermath of the war worked greatly to pizza's advantage, with the food becoming easier than ever to make and sell. New machines capable of squirting, stirring, and baking at a truly massive scale made pizza easy to mass produce in factories, while the increasing popularity of freezers, ovens, and microwaves in American homes allowed these machine-made pizzas to be flash frozen, shipped across the country, and sold at America's new mega supermarkets. To suburban families in the 1950s, buying a frozen pizza and heating it up to eat at home was exactly the sort of futuristic marvel that embodied all of the hype and glamour of the atomic age. And part of the reason suburban families were able to buy exciting novelties like frozen pizzas in the first place was because America experienced a huge economic boom in the aftermath of the Second World War, which gave average Americans a lot more disposable income to spend on things like fancy meals, either at home or at restaurants. The 1950s and 60s heralded the dawn of a great American institution, the chain restaurant, with two of the most successful chains being places that specialized in pizza, Pizza Hut and Domino's. By the late 1970s, Pizza Hut alone was selling over 100 million pizzas a year. The rise of these pizza megacorps also did a lot to standardize what we could describe as the predictable canon of American pizza styles. Pepperoni, meat lovers, vegetarian, cheese, and eventually even Hawaiian, that most controversial of pizzas that made heavy use of the pineapple, a newly abundant crop from America's newest state. Now, in order to compete with the convenience of frozen pizza, the big pizza chains made home delivery a key part of their business model, with Domino's being the first to make the idea of a 30-minute delivery official company policy. 30 minutes or the pizza's free has become one of the most famous slogans in American commercial culture, and one of the most famous cliches of American pizza culture specifically. But when I was researching this, I was surprised to find that it is actually a kind of Mandela effect type thing. Domino's never actually had a policy of giving out free pizzas if they didn't come fast enough. The 30-minute delivery gimmick was considered a strong enough marketing draw on its own. At best, they briefly had a policy of giving you a $3 voucher if your driver took longer than 30 minutes. In any case, Domino's got a ton of bad press for their 30-minute delivery policy after they introduced it in the early 1980s. Critics blamed it for causing traffic accidents and even deaths, and the company officially abandoned the promise in 1994. According to this subreddit for Domino's workers, however, the ongoing popularity of this urban myth remains a big headache for the company to this day. So as a large, highly shareable food, pizza integrated well into the golden age of American socializing that dawned after the war, with middle-class families finding it to be the perfect food for things like a get-together at the bowling club, a celebratory dinner for the Pee Wee football team, or Little Janet's Sweet 16 birthday party. By the 1960s, publications like The New Yorker were reporting that pizza parlors were starting to push out ice cream shops as the hottest teen hangout in America's big urban centers, a phenomenon that overlapped with teen culture in the United States becoming increasingly defined by rebellion and non-conformity. Going out for pizza with your friends became an exercise in teenage autonomy, a retreat to a fun space outside of the home for those not yet old enough to start hitting the bars or clubs. It wasn't until the mid-1980s, however, that pizza started to be marketed to America's youth as an explicitly cool food, a trend which occurred amid the commercialization of cool more broadly during that decade of decadence. Now, it is of course impossible to talk about American pizza culture in the 1980s without mentioning the They first burst onto the scene with a 1984 comic book, which then inspired a 1988 cartoon, and then a couple of movies, video games, all sorts of toys, and basically anything else you could get kids to want. The Ninja Turtles wound up being some of the most beloved pop culture characters in American history, and during their peak, a lot of kids even looked up to them as role models. As someone who grew up in that era, I remember this caused a bit of a moral panic for a time, with adult authority figures decrying the Turtles as rude and violent and a bad influence. You'd often hear of schools that went as far as banning turtle toys or even playing turtles on the playground. But for all the flack the Turtles got for inspiring kids to pretend yardsticks were katanas or using foul language like "gimme a break," they had a more benign impact on youth culture as well. For one, they undeniably played a major role in making pizza more popular in America, since it was portrayed as being the Turtles' favorite food. I have very strong memories of this as well. Kids wanting to eat pizza all of the time because of how closely they associated it with their turtle heroes, or even wanting to eat all sorts of crazy junk on pizza because that's what the Turtles did. I remember attending one birthday party in particular where we ate pizza with Golden Grams and jelly beans because that seemed like the sort of thing our beloved Turtles would do. An interesting piece of Turtles trivia, however, is that they didn't actually eat pizza at all in the original comic. This was a new personality trait explicitly dreamed up for the animated series. I haven't been able to find a super clear explanation of precisely why this was added to official Turtle lore, other than it was a way to make the characters seem more cool and relatable to the show's preteen audience, which I guess you could say makes the Turtles' impact on American pizza culture a bit of a chicken and egg type thing. They helped make pizza more popular, but only because it was already popular. But in any case, associating with pizza in order to get cool points with the youth wasn't just a Turtles thing. The 80s and 90s saw pizza everywhere. It had a prominent role in music videos and movies. There were pizza-themed board games and pizza-themed video games, not to mention weird pizza-themed birthday restaurants with creepy animatronic robots that probably came alive at night and ate the security guards. Pizza even became one of the biggest cliches in American porn. Things have